Welcome to the City. I'm Anthony Wilson, the Public Information Officer for the City of San Angelo. And joining us today is our District 2 City Councilman, Tom Thompson. We are sitting here in the Spur Club at the Spur Arena. Tom, of course, is the Marketing Director for the San Angelo Stock Show and Rodeo Association. Councilman, thanks for being with us.
It's a good day today, and it's always a fun day when we're here on the grounds. I thank you for doing this, and maybe we can get some information out that people want to hear.
Well, let's hope. So let's start off with sort of the most obvious question. Why did you want to run for City Council?
This one is a question I've been asked a lot, and it all started actually about a year ago. Justin Jonas, Executive Director of the Rodeo, and I were sitting at a restaurant. Marty Self, who had SMD2, was talking about, you know what, it's probably my last year. And Justin popped off about it. Well, you ought to run for that. Time rolled ahead. You don't think about those things, but then you see things where you want to contribute. Marty gave me a call and said, hey, let's go talk. And I sat down and talked with him. And you ask about the time that's going to be involved. And, you know, I have other jobs and there's things I need to do, but to be a part of, I'd say, the navigation of which way the ship's going to go was interesting to me. And we kind of made that decision in February and said, let's go ahead and run for it. And I think it's great to help be part of the leadership and the direction which way the city wants to go.
Were there, aside from wanting to make a contribution to the community, were there any issues or specific goals that spurred you to run?
From a large viewpoint, nothing, okay, was grabbing at me saying you have to address this. What I noticed while I campaigned was I was the only person that wasn't running because I was mad about something. And I saw Dwayne Morrison, our previous mayor, point that out in an interview. He said most people run because something really grabs them. I'm passionate about the north side of town. I love the fact of the friendliness and the way this community pulls together. It's North Chadbourn, it's Lakeview. People realize it's its own crowd, but when a group pulls together, you can always count on North Chadbourn. I think that was part of it.
So you mentioned about your campaigning. What did you learn during the course of your campaign that you think is serving you well now as a city council member?
I watched a lot of people get questions that were very direct and one-sided. And I think a lot of people look for a black and white answer. I think I got a lot of questions about the Ford Ranch, water, trash, utilities. Trash contract was always huge, and people were trying to. And my answer to them was, I can't answer something that somebody else has made the decision on because I don't have all the information. And I see a lot of people try to back someone in a corner. And until I know everything that was out on the table, I'm not going to do that. So what I learned was you got to see all sides of it. You got to understand where they sit. And if you can't feel that person's position and why they're coming to you, I don't think you can do the job effectively. So what I learned, listen. I mean, it's by far better to listen than to be talking.
And what did people talk to you most about?
Just water. I mean, that one was huge. The Ford Ranch was in negotiations at that time. The trash contract was big. Roads are huge up here on North Chadbourn. North Bryant, there's a lot of side roads that we'll discuss about later in it, but there were things that just some maintenance and infrastructure that needs to happen. You can't really pick one, but those were things that were passionate on everybody's mind.
And so as you listened, how did what you were hearing shape your opinions? How did it maybe change your opinions?
The Ford Ranch, I'll use that one for an example. We've closed the case on that. It was real interesting to me while we were looking at such a big piece of property. But once we got into that and I was on city council to help with the closing of that, I think it's probably one of the most brilliant moves the city's ever done. We protected the citizens of San Angelo and our water supply, not for 5 years, for 10, but maybe for out to 50, maybe out to 70 years. And we don't have to worry about ever losing that cusp of water that we have. I thought that was very impressive.
You've been in office for about 5 months now. How has the experience met up with the expectations that you may have had for serving on the city council?
It has been an education. And to sit up there and listen to people, they'll come forward to you and say, here is this, here's my opinion. And you might not have even thought about that. I said it one the other day when we were listening, and a lady stood up and she showed She literally said, here's the deed to my house that I bought this many years ago. I didn't buy it thinking this was going to happen in the future. And that's my concern and why I stand in front of you today. And she turned around and walked off. Probably one of the most moving things somebody's ever said. And he went, you know what, we are here for citizens. She's not in my district, but I understand what her passion was about why she stood in front of us. I get to sit between Tommy Hebert and Harry Thomas. All right, probably two of the most experienced gentlemen we could put on the council. There's a lot of wisdom on the left and right side of me. And I defer to them a bunch, and we'll talk and say, okay, what are your thoughts on this? Which way are you leaning? And there may be things I didn't even perceive, but it's always been, and I'll steal this from Tommy Hebert, if we make common sense decisions for what's best for everybody, we ought to come out of this thing okay.
When you led perfectly into the question I was going to follow up with, you mentioned about this lady wasn't in your district. So how do you balance sort of what's best for District 2 versus what may be best for the community as a whole?
When something comes up on the agenda, I'll literally look at the address. If it's something with the zoning, if it's in my district, it says SMD2, I'll go drive it and look at it. I've had my son with me, and we were looking at a zoning change, and I actually asked him, okay, you've got a house here and a house there. Would it make sense to have, and he said, houses here instead of commercial. I said, okay, that's something to go up. When something comes from outside my district up to the agenda, I'll usually try to defer, and I'll pay real close attention to whoever is, the council member for that district. I mean, Billy's had some things that she's had to look at. Harry's had some, Hebert, Lane, all. And it's interesting to see what they want to push and represent. You want to understand their opinion, but you also got to take the public opinion on this and say, okay, what's the overall picture?
So tell me 3 things that you hope to accomplish during your term in office.
I want to make sure we complete the Ford Ranch plan with water. I think there's a plan to take that ranch, to make that to where it wasn't an expense, it was an investment, and it may be a very fundable venture that we actually come back and we break even and we put all of those assets here at 0 cost. I think that would just be novel to be able to sit here and I travel quite a bit and I listen to people talk about water and I sit back and giggle and say, you know what? I hope my kids never have to worry about water, and I'm helping in that decision right here. Economic development, that's the whole key. You want a tax base that's wide and you want a tax base that's thin. It's a lot better to take a lot of money from very few, over a lot of people, a very small amount. I think that's wisdom, and nobody feels the pain of that. So economic development is by far the biggest thing you can do that'll push the needle to this is easier for us to get forward. Nobody has to bear the entire financial burden of that. So I think that's great. The third one has just kind of developed on me the past 3-4 months. North Chadbourn, I'd love to see the TIERS funding, the tax incentive reinvestment zone. I'd love to see more businesses on North Chadbourn and more in North Bryant use those funds to develop what they have, develop the facades, make it something that's pretty. We have a few commercial restaurants that have done that, and they just look absolutely outstanding. And so I want to improve the picture on one of the oldest parts of town. And I think as we move through that, we'll do that.
Well, and the third thing you mentioned obviously is very specific to District 2. How do you think that you might be able to help facilitate more of that, those tax dollars being reinvested back into improvements here in District 2?
I drive Chadbourn 2 to 3 times, 4 or 5 times a day. I know where every chug hole is. All right, there's things I want to fix, but you want your district, you want to be proud of your home. I mean, I'd love to say I was a helpful part in this people becoming a better or a more beautiful spot. And I think that's all in North Chadbourn. I think that's all in North Bryant.
The City Council recently approved the 2018 budget, as you know, which held the line on spending with 3 exceptions. And those were more firefighters, more police officers, and pay raises for city employees. Why did you support the proposal to add the firefighters and the police officers?
Public safety is never anything we can compromise on. I mean, it's a given. You never want to let those things be something that was in neglect. Firefighters, we needed some staff there to man, and we have such a demand on the accountable units that actually go out, we needed more staff to help with that. Frank Carter, I mean, listen to the person that runs the department. Frank said, I need more officers. You know, there were some things that were on the table. Frank said, above all, I need 5 more officers. I need them. You know what? Okay, when the man that's steering the ship down there says, this is my biggest desire and need right now, above any other thing, you listen. All right. Pay raises for the city. The staff and the employees of the city are by far our best asset. I mean, that's what makes us as good as we are. And some people haven't seen that. And I will say something from my position. I've got to meet now a lot of the city staff and personnel, outstanding at what they do and get very little credit for it. You know, I think much like a teacher, they don't get paid near what they deserve. I'd love to see something in the future to take care of them in continuity all the time. You can't do that because we never know what our economy is going to be.
At the same time, why was it important to limit any sort of spending increases to just those 3 areas?
During everybody's campaign in the first year, April, May, June, July, and I say that as people finished up into July, a lot of people campaigned on, we spend a lot of money. Well, that's true. I mean, we're running, you know, basically the largest city in Texas that doesn't have an interstate through it. There's a lot of financial demand on it. As we go forward, a lot of those people campaigned on, we need to tighten up what we spend on and really look at it. What a lot of people don't understand is just because we put it in the budget doesn't mean we have to do it. But if you never put it in the budget, it won't ever happen at all. And that was something that I learned when we looked at what things we were going to put in. But our Mayor Gunter, and several people said, we need to really watch what our spending is. We don't want to be known as somebody that's, you know, I'd say frivolous with what we do. And I think the mayor made that her key point, and we all agreed. I mean, you can have whatever you can afford to do. And to be honest, if you don't know where I stole that quote, I stole that from you. You know, whatever you can afford to do is fine, but if you can't afford to do it, we need to keep it where it's at. And I think it was a very strong message that we heard everybody that was talking to us, and we understood that. Whether we agreed with it or not, you saw us vote 7-0. We're sticking right here.
And in the same line, the City Council approved keeping the tax rate at 77.6 cents, which it's been at for the last 4 years. What factored into your decision of holding the line on the property tax rate as well?
We don't set the appraisals on the property, but we set a tax rate to, you know, adjust and balance out our revenue. And keeping everything the way it is says, you know what, we recognize our responsibility of managing this for the city. I don't think there's a constituent in SMD2 that would say, oh, don't worry about what we're spending. You know, money's never easy. We can't go plant the tree. I have to tell my kids that all the time. There's not a money tree out there. I'll just go plant another one. But it's important that we realize we have what we have. We're not going to abuse it, and let's be, you know, basically mindful and knowledgeable about what we have.
Of course, water and streets seem to be cemented as San Angelo's top priorities this year and for years to come. You've talked about fully developing the Ford Ranch and the Hickory Aquifer and its capabilities. In addition to that, what will you be pushing for to happen in regards to water?
In water, we need to complete the Ford Ranch. We need to drill some more wells. Not cheap. I mean, we're down half a mile. Those things are a couple $1 million. We need to work on our capacity. I don't think a fact of what the water is and the source is now. It's a fact of, can we manage our capacity to capitalize and maximize what we get out of the Ford Ranch? We share Lake Ivy with a couple other municipalities. And so you never know if we're in a drought, how long some of that water is going to last. We've got to finish the wells at the Ford Ranch. We have to look at that property and the best way it's going to manage, and we have to protect that with the easements around our wells so nobody's right there beside. I mean, there are security and safety concerns with that also. And I think we need to get rid of some of the property that we don't have that's imperative to the management of the wells.
As you know, the City Council has also approved a 10-year, $80 million plan to improve and rebuild San Angelo's worst streets. We are in the 3rd year of an 8-year cycle to do preventive maintenance on every city street, and a new asphalt recycler has been deployed to smooth streets that are sort of in between needing preventative maintenance and a complete reconstruction. Is there anything more that you think needs to be done to ensure that San Angelo has good streets, or is it simply a matter of staying the course with the things that are already in place?
It's a catch-22. I was fortunate enough to have lunch with Shane Kelton the other day in operations, and we just happened to be at the same restaurant at the same time on North Chadbourn, and which we sat there and walked in. I said, "Do you mind if I sit with you?" And it was great to sit down and hear his opinion of it. He is 12 men short, and it's been tough for him to keep people and stay in there. So it's staff. He's been great to help wherever I've had, major chug holes and problems, potholes we need to take care of. And I asked him about the new, I think it's called the Vendetti machine. Mm-hmm. How does that work? And he gave me a good 20-minute information conversation about where I can fix roads and where I can't. And some roads, it depends upon the base. Some are too thin, some may be too thick. These things just can't show up when we throw the switch and it works. He talked about running North Chadbourn, running streets on, this end of town that didn't have the manholes and things that we have to worry about. I think those are things we'd all love to see. I think we've got to stay our course with our plan, but maybe we can expedite that plan. Is there a way to spend more time in that to get people filled? Do we have to maybe look at how our budget is and say, we need to build a team, a strategic-minded team that will run this part of repairing the roads? Number one thing I hear, I had to put new brake calipers on the old truck the other day because I have beaten them off. And I'm like, I'm with you. Same thing. I feel it. Every one. I'd love for us to get to it sooner, but there's a plan and a course. And sometimes it does us better to do a seal coat and maintenance on a road that's only 8 or 10 years in its existence than one that's 30. I mean, we can do maintenance on some that are just at the cusp and extend their life by far better than we can extend one that's just barely salvageable no matter what you did for another 2. So stay the course. Maybe we can drive it a little faster.
I see this on our social media all the time. When we address city streets, people are always saying that the south side and the southwest side of the city are given preferential treatment as opposed to the north side of the city. Do you see that to be the case?
No, and it's a very fair system, all right? And I've talked with Shane. Naturally, before I took in the office and actually looked at all the information, I thought that wasn't fair. It's a newer part of town. It's going to have a different complexion to it, all right? There's changes in technology and how we build base and build roads. They're always going to appear that way once we come back over here, but we're on a big plan. I mean, we're doing we're just finishing up the Martin Luther King project. It was to go down. That road's going to be awesome. While there's some growing pains and some 2 or 3 months, it's going to be one of the nicest roads we have, right by a park, right by a shopping center, and it will be there in its longevity for years. The maintenance of it will be minimal. It takes time. They don't pick on the north side of town. I just think we're the older side of town.
The Planning and Development Director, John James, recently briefed the City Council on how many of the timelines for getting a building permit and an inspection have been shortened dramatically in some cases. Is there more that you think can and should be done to streamline the development process here in San Angelo?
There's some things that are really novel out on the horizon, but that was something that was brought up to me when I was running for office. There were some home builders and then some people that I know in construction personally, from up here in my district that said, it's just been terrible the amount of time it's taken. So I visited with Rick Weiss about that. And Rick told me as far as planning inspection, some of the pains he has with staff, and some of my people in key positions have only been here, a year and a half. And then he goes through the steps that have gone through to shorten the timeline. I think John James is one of the most brilliant people I've ever listened to. How he handles himself and his knowledge and depth of it all the way through planning, through zoning, and what's practical, and he says, while this might be the zone definition of this area, it may not fit, it may not be appropriate because we have outside it. So I send this to you to council to make a decision. I think what they've done is outstanding. I think there's technology in the future in software development, like there's stuff out there called blockchain, very similar to Bitcoin. And you see cities moving to it with their permitting and things where all of that data is a lot more available. It's a lot more easy to access. And you read about some cities, municipalities have been able to trim that load down to 30% of what they had and be a third the time they were. But I mean, these people made those investments 2 or 3 years ago in a technology that people hadn't even heard of. So where would we be if we'd bought 2 shares of Amazon, years ago? Amazon's great, but it was an investment back then. It's nothing that really helps our city. It's what I tell people. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but you got to stick back to the source of what we have, of the city. Rick Wise, John James have done an outstanding job, Michael Dane, of getting that down to where we can do business here in a quick and orderly fashion. You never want it to be a pain to go down and get a permit.
You hear that criticism from local developers about it being an onerous process, but then you also hear from developers like Walmart or H-E-B or some of the retail chains that we have here in town now that say that we're actually pretty easy to deal with. So how do you determine, who's right and who's not in that sort of situation?
Well, it's what we talk. If you don't have all the information and some outside visibility and experience of what's happened here, you can't make a fair decision. There are people that have come here and said, I had no problem at all. I've done this commercially. I went through these steps. I also did this in 2 other places. Y'all were fine. I don't understand. We are an on-demand society. We don't have much patience. We want it to be now, now, now. And sometimes we don't realize the steps in construction. But it's by far better to make a good decision than to make a fast, poor one.
You mentioned that economic development is one of your priorities. It's certainly been the centerpiece of Mayor Gunter's service as mayor. What has San Angelo done right when it comes to luring and creating more jobs here in town?
We are very passionate about economic development. I think we all share that. We all understand that the best way for us to increase our revenue for the city is through economic development. We're sitting in the middle of a room that was created on half-cent sales tax. I work for a company in the Stock Show and Rodeo Association, and during the month of February, it brings in $9 to $10 million worth of economic impact just to the city of San Angelo. Over the period of a year, it'll bring close to $30 million of economic impact to San Angelo. It's huge. While we don't get that, the city shares that income. Hotels, restaurants, convenience stores, everybody gets a merchandise, retail. They all get a huge boost in February. Wouldn't it be great if we could have that several times throughout the year? Wouldn't it be something if the demand for shopping and all that was there because we had an increased number of people? It's important. Economic development will drive this city. With our new ideas of how we want to go with the future, it's the key to a town of our size, 100,000 population. It's a key to us becoming 120 and 150, feeling that economic impact and not feeling the pains of a 200,000 population city.
So what can we do better in regards to economic development? Roland
Pena has done a very aggressive job bringing people to the industrial park. We've seen some added things there that are going forward. I think there's, and I share this with Mayor Gunter, I think there's some opportunities at the air park, through schools and education and people that could use an air park that probably has 320 great flying days a year. I think there's lots of space out there. We need to be able to go out and find these people, use the chamber, use Roland, use assets, get them to come to San Angelo. You know what? We just done some stuff here on North Martin Luther King. And a guy is in the oil field business, but he says, you know what? I've been in Midland, Odessa. San Angelo is right on the edge of it. It's just as economically feasible to move it out of San Angelo out into that area than it is for me to move from there and be. And he says, and you know what? I love San Angelo. I've been here. I'm spending time and money here because I love San Angelo.
We're sitting here, as I mentioned in the beginning, at the First Community Credit Union Spur Arena here in the Spur Club, which the city built, but your employer, the Stock Show and Rodeo Association, manages. And the Spur Arena also, as I mentioned, is in your district. How important are these sort of public-private partnerships?
It's worked great. You'd love to see lots of them. Built with, half-cent sales tax. Paid for itself probably within a few years. There's been great presidents of the association that's a 501c3. It's a nonprofit. A lot of people don't realize We're making money for a foundation and a scholarship fund, but it's been great to do that and also be a very large economic impact driver for the city. These grounds host, this building alone probably does over, I think my last count was about 48 events throughout the year. With that, it probably has 60 to 70,000 single views, people walking from one end to the other. It's great. I mean, to bring those people to Angelo to see it, and every person that comes in here spends a lot of money in our town. You would love to see all the private public relationships be financially independent the way we are, but you have to manage them very well. I work with an outstanding team over at the stock show office. Brilliant minds that say, here's what we need to do, and this is a good thing, and this drives more things to us, and it builds what we have.
You mentioned that during the month of February, you guys are really hustling around here because, of course, that's Stock Show and Rodeo Month. So how do you plan on juggling your job as marketing director for the Stock Show and Rodeo Association with your city council duties when it comes to the month of February?
Yeah, I got that a lot when I was running, and people were like, so hey, I said, you know what, we're just gonna work that one as it goes. You try to manage your time to where you don't abuse anybody. You want to stay relevant to all the issues. The rodeo, it's been in the planning all year round. When we closed last year's rodeo, we were already making plans for this year's rodeo. I've already looked at the dates of when we're supposed to have council dates. One of them's on a second day of slack, and another one is a day where we don't have an event here at the rodeo. So I'm good there. I might be real tired, I might be kind of sleepy, but I'll be there. But when you have a great team, and I'm saying on the stock show side of it and on the city side of it, it's not going to be anything. In fact, maybe it'll help a little bit.
What do you like about most about serving on the city council?
What I have learned about it, and I've told this to my wife, very patient lady, puts up with me, and everybody knows that, is what you get to learn from sitting in this position. I haven't inherited anything. I don't have millions of dollars to give to anybody. But what I can give is a little stewardship and help serve. What I have met, or the people I've met, and what I've learned just in the short period of time I've been here, has just been fascinating. And some people say, well, I use the word fascinating. You know what, to see what things people actually do to accomplish in the planning that's been in place for years and projects and studies, I was fixed to say, if anybody hasn't ever served and they want to serve, get involved, learn what does that. And you know what, I think it'll make your life simpler in how you actually look at things, grasp them, and explain them to other people.
As I tell people, there is actually a method to the madness of city government.
It's outstanding, and people don't understand, our whole nation runs on that. I mean, it's, Dwayne used that, grassroots democracy phrase, and I just loved to hear him say it because it was pure North Chadbourne. But there are people making plans all over, and we just went to the TML in Houston.
Texas Municipal League.
Texas Municipal League, and we visit with people from big cities, small cities, Pecos, Graham, wherever, and what I learned from same concerns we do. And some of them fit small cities, and they're like, we don't know how to pay for this fire truck. We're dealing with that. We're looking at, how we're going to do our financing on this. Then you listen to somebody from like Grand Prairie or Plano, and they talk about their budget, and they just have $100 million going down this one street and building a complex. But it's all still the same. We're all trying to do what's best for the people and what's best for our city.
So if people have an opinion they'd like to share with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say you can probably, best way to do it's on email. Tom Thompson at COSA Texas.
Tom.Thompson.
Tom.Thompson at COSATX.US.
Very good. Councilman, thanks for being with us.
I've had a great time.
Me
Thank
too.
you.
And we hope you'll join us for the next episode of The City.